Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is in a really good place right now, but things have not always been this great. Here to talk to me today about where Space Marine was when it released and where it's going in the future is First Tour Guardsman. FTG, how are you doing today, man?
I am doing great, and I'm happy to talk about Space Marine 2's current state because the game has changed a ton in the past year, let alone the past 2 years as we move into year 3.
But things weren't always like this, right? I mean, you and I both played on release, and I know that I approached this game as like, oh yeah, this is going to be a really fun Warhammer 40k game. The story is going to be good. I didn't really have any expectations for operations. I just kind of saw it as like this extra game mode, but people had some pretty high expectations for that period. Why don't you talk me through some of that?
Well, when it comes to like the state of Space Marine 2 now, I think year 2 was really when the game hit its stride because initially like the year 1 roadmap was something they planned before the game even came out, before they knew like the initial success it would actually have. And once we moved into year 2, like that was the post-update launch support that we were really just kind of expecting initially, a lot of players were expecting initially in terms of content quality, because the big thing about year 1 was like Horde mode was the main mode people were looking forward to. We also had the Prestige update in April of last year, and then when year 2 came out, it was just like banger after banger. Patch 10 launched, and like that was the point when Space Marine 2 became like, okay, this is a proper horde shooter. They are doing proper support for the game beyond just like mediocre updates, and it brought in a ton of players, and a lot of those players have stayed, and I really say the game in general is in a significantly better spot than it was initially, not just in terms of content but also in balance of content, because all the weapons from launch are way better. The build variety is way better. Even the worst classes for build variety are substantially improved over that initial launch period. So I'd say the game is in a great spot, and I think the players have responded really well to those updates because of the content quality and those balance changes.
Yeah, and beyond weapon balance and content updates, I think that Space Marine 2 did a phenomenal job with converting a lot of basically like newbies into Warhammer fans. Like this was a lot of people's first Warhammer 40k game, and it shows because a lot of people who kind of start breaching into the Warhammer 40k space, usually they start with Space Marines. This happened back in Dawn of War when that released, and it happened when Space Marine 1 released as well. But Space Marine 2 has really taken it to the next level. What exactly in the game is causing people to become such diehard fans?
I feel like the customization is a huge portion of that, because a lot of people will see like, oh, I have the color of this Marine, the color of this armor. Also, all the DLC is based on these chapters. Like that's a very easy entry point for players. It also helps that a lot of the community that came into the game at launch was already a bunch of like diehard 40k fans, really. So when they came into the game, you'd play with like players randomly online. They'd be like, oh, that's a mentor, or like, oh, that's an Imperial Fist. And they'd tell you about all of this lore. And also, we saw a huge influx in like viewership on just like the lore channels on YouTube because of the game. There's
Yeah.
also a ton of like Easter eggs in the campaign that like you really wouldn't get if you aren't a diehard 40k fan. So you'd be like, what's that? Like, what character is this? What the hell is a Primarch and stuff like that? And really, the Primarchs and things like Space Marines are the entry point anyways to 40k. So having a hugely popular horde shooter that's pretty casual and really good, just like sit down, play for 30 minutes, it really is just the perfect entry point. I would normally say like Rogue Trader might be a better game as a 40k story, but Space Marine 2 hits all the major notes of Ultramarines, banner holding, and just some chaos stuff and some Tyranids, because those are the prominent figures in the 40k mythos at the moment.
Yeah, they definitely do a really good job of basically introducing the casual audience to the setting, and I completely agree with you. With Rogue Trader, if you're already a fan of the setting, it's kind of the perfect game because it's the story that touches on so many different Xenos races and Chaos factions. But with Space Marine 2, it's like, hey, here's an introduction to everything that we have here in 40k and everything that's relevant right now. One thing that I was thinking about recently, though, was so we've got this casual introduction to the game, but this update, the Purgation update, has definitely made things a bit more hardcore. Why don't you talk to us about the Purgation update and what it's added to the game?
Well, the Purgation update gave us the Ultra Grind ordeals, which are by far the hardest post-launch cosmetic content unlocks, I would say. Where you have to play like 50 absolute missions to get your capes, or 50 absolute missions to play Iron Halos, or 25 waves of Hard Siege for some of the other unlocks. And like all of these are a little bit outside the scope of your average player, I would say. Like this is something I mentioned in a video of my own at one point, where the Wave 25 Hard Siege, that is legitimately outside the scope for a lot of casual players. And same thing with like 50 absolute missions, where it may seem like pretty trivial to a die-hard player of Space Marine 2, but like these are proper post like endgame content unlocks, really, and we didn't have that for a long time. And even though the hard stratagems were always very difficult, now we have this point in time where you're forced to play the hardest difficulty. There isn't a normal mode for these unlocks in the Ultra Grind ordeals, so if you don't know how to play Absolute, if you can't do that, your only option is cheese through custom strats, which they have said they won't nerf. But that being said, the intention here is very clearly to give the die-hard players a post-launch content of cosmetic unlocks. So I would say that's a pretty good thing for the game, but definitely hardcore.
I think it's definitely good for the game because, like you mentioned, Space Marine 2 didn't really previously have end game content. It didn't really have content that players could strive to get better for, not in the same way that something like Darktide does, where you have the entire Havoc game mode, where you kind of incrementally work on getting better. With Space Marine 2, it has, or had, previously always been a more casual game, but judging by a lot of the leaks that we're seeing, these Ultra Grinds, they're going to continue to stick around. Can you talk to us about maybe what we can expect in the anniversary update or what's been leaked for the game?
Well, we have patch 14 coming out. They'll add in like 6 new heroic items and give us the War Gear Update Part 2 for cloaks and tabards. I imagine they're going to go back and like add in some new cosmetic unlocks for the current Ultra Grind ordeals we have. But the big thing here is that as we move into year 3, they're trying to like set up the War Gear unlock system to be an endgame grind for those players that have been playing the whole time, as they bring in new players for year 3 with like a new class as well in the future. And as far as like the cosmetic unlocks and leaks we've had are concerned, we have Suffer Death Watch, which could be in the Ultra Grind system, but I really think this would be more like a Heroic Store item. And we're also going to be getting stuff like the Mentors Packs, which could also be in the Heroic Store or in the Ultra Grind ordeals, because something we've been really moving towards as we go forward into Space Marine 2 is giving more chapter-specific free cosmetic unlocks in the game. So stuff like the Head Taker helm for the Wolf Priest.
That's right.
Things like a Black Crusader or Black Templar Crusader helmet that we didn't have previously, because we've really been seeing this push in both heroic weapons and heroic cosmetics to be chapter particular, and that wasn't really something we saw before, because a lot of these were just like, oh, this is a Mark 7, oh, this is a Mark 8 helmet. And as we go forward into Space Marine 2, they're really trying to expand that with free unlocks as well as DLC unlocks, because I've talked about this before a little bit, that like the Ultra Grind system is good for the game, but giving players a accolade system unlock for cosmetics, I think that's a bit better for the casual audience, just because accolades are a bit easier to get for a lot of players and like grinding out absolute missions. But that's really what we can look forward to for now, because we really don't know a ton about patch 15, and patch 14 is looking to be far smaller, but we'll still expand the War Gear customization.
Yeah, I'm really excited for those heroic weapons. Specifically, I saw that they leaked a Power Fist with, was it like a flamer or a bolter? It's basically like a combi
Yeah, the Inferno
weapon.
combi.
Dude, that looks really freaking sweet. I can't wait to play around with it. Obviously, it's gonna be busted on Bulwark and Assault. But some of the other things that are coming, and you kind of mentioned this while you were talking, is we've already got a new class confirmed coming for 2027, and I really applaud the developers and the publisher for being so transparent with the content that is coming to Space Marine 2, because we kind of already have this idea that this game is going to be supported until Space Marine 3 releases, which is going to be a massive moment for the franchise and for the overall narrative of Warhammer 40k, especially if it's centered around something like Armageddon or 500 Worlds. I assume that it's going to continue to follow Captain Titus in the story, but when do you expect that Space Marine 3 is going to drop, realistically?
Well, they said previously the game's on a 4-year dev cycle, which would put it around like 2029 or 2030 at the earliest, and that makes a lot of sense because Saber has been like, planning a ton of post-launch content for Space Marine 2 really since before the game even came out. It may have come as a shock to a lot of players that Space Marine 2's post-launch content was so substantial, but given the success of this game being Saber's most popular game ever, on top of the fact that before the game even came out, they already said they wanted to follow a trajectory like they have with World War Z, where they give a bunch of post-launch classes, post-launch support, and stuff like that, because Saber doesn't drop most of their games. In the case of Space Marine 2, I think that Space Marine 2 might actually be the better game by the time Space Marine 3 comes out, because I don't know how you could possibly like launch a brand new title with as much content as a prior title that's had 4 years, if not like 5 years, of post-launch support with cosmetic unlocks, cosmetic DLC, potentially even gameplay DLC like an expansion pack in the future, because they did do something like that for World War Z. And when it comes to Space Marine 3's release date, it's going to be ages. I see some people talk about this sometimes, like, oh, is Space Marine 3 going to be shown next year? I would not expect it anytime soon. I think their main focus, as far as like Space Marine is concerned right now, is just the post-launch support and cosmetic packs and stuff like that.
Yeah, they may have to change how the actual gameplay sandbox works and really innovate on how we experience the PvE in the game. For example, instead of doing operations, maybe do something more akin to what Helldivers 2 does, and literally run the entire 500 Worlds campaign, where you have all these planets, all these different tile sets, and things that players can experience, and then do what some other games are doing. For example, I know that the Guild Wars franchise is doing this, and I believe World of Warcraft, where you're basically updating every version of the game that you have at the same time, because the games all feel so drastically different. Although that would be a pretty risky play. The one thing that I do know is that I'm glad that the developers and publisher have been this transparent, because I know that the future is bright for this franchise, and the future is bright for us as Warhammer 40k fans. That's going to be where we wrap the video up though, guys. FTG, do you have anything to add?
Well, I guess I would add that I think Space Marine 2 is just going to get post-launch support like year pass after year pass all the way up until Space Marine 3. I mean, they talked previously that Tech Marine, they were going to wait until the launch of Tech Marine to see how well it actually performed and how well year 2 performed to like greenlight other things. And I really don't see a world in which the year 3 underperforms compared to like year 1, which was already enough to get year 2 greenlit. So I would really expect like a full post-launch support all the way up until Space Marine 3, and like really the season pass is going to keep on coming for that reason. Those were my final thoughts on that. I think the future of Space Marine 2 is really great for not just gaming fans, but 40k fans, like you said, because that's what got me into the game in the first place, was that I loved 40k, and
Yeah.
here we are like almost 2 years later, and I'm still playing this game with like 5,000 hours, and I'm not really that bored of it yet.
Amazing. Peak, even. Well, thank you for
Very
joining
big.
us, guys. Make sure that you stop by First Tour Guardsman's channel and subscribe to him if you haven't already. And also subscribe to me, and don't forget to like, hype, and leave a comment down below letting us know what you think about the state of the game right now. As always, this has been Jefficus. The Emperor Protects.